Leaving can be such a pivotal point for people, and trying to do it with safety as being the forefront is really, really important. And it's one of the most dangerous times.
Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. My guest today is Mardi Chadwick-Balcom. Mardi is a divorce mediator and nervous system informed coach, as well as a former litigation attorney. We begin today's episode by talking about her early work in domestic violence law. But this episode is ultimately about something that applies to nearly everyone. How regulating your nervous system during divorce can shift not just your experience, but also the outcomes you walk away with. And if nervous system regulation sounds a little abstract or woo-woo, don't worry. We talk about the science behind it and what it looks like in real life, including some free resources you can experiment with today. Let's get into my conversation with Mardi. Welcome to The Details, Mardi.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here with you today, Allison. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So as we dive in, I would love if you could just start by telling us a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah, so I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 27 years, graduated back in 1998. And I've spent most of my career as a divorce lawyer, actually. When I graduated from law school, I had this notion that I was going to be a prosecutor working specifically with domestic violence cases. Unfortunately, back in that time, in where I live, I'm up in Northeast Massachusetts, they weren't hiring. There was a hiring freeze. And so I was fresh out of law school, newly married, had lots of loans. And my husband at the time was like, yeah, you need to go get a job. You can't wait. Like, what are you going to do? And so I found a job at a local domestic violence program. Between my first and second interview, I found out I passed the bar exam, and they were like, great. So I was being hired for a legal advocate, which, I don't know what even I was going to do, but I'm like, it's a job, right? And it's something that I really care about. And they said, yeah, you can be a lawyer. We need you to do divorces and restraining orders. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so that's how I ended up kind of in the world of divorce law. But if you'd asked me when I went to law school, I had no interest. I never took a family law class. I didn't know anything about it other than I really wanted to work in the field supporting survivors of domestic violence. So that's kind of how I ended up in that place.
Wow. And without getting into any of the specifics of the, stories or specific cases that you worked on, can you just give us a sense of what are some of the things that you were exposed to through that work?
Why I went into the world of divorce or domestic violence was I had been in college worked around sexual violence, and then learned as I volunteered around domestic violence, and just felt like it was there was something about it that I felt very called to about working with people who didn't have a voice. And so what I learned is that in the context of relationship, when there's been so much imbalance in power and control, really is what it's about, that leaving can be such a pivotal point for people. And trying to do it with safety as being the forefront is really, really important. And it's one of the most dangerous times, particularly if there's history of a lot of physical abuse or even emotional, financial. There's so many different types of abuse. But God, when I started, I had done all my work around criminal law. So I was really prepared to deal with the aftermath, but not actually holding people who are walking through this very difficult time. Divorce is so hard for so many reasons, but to walk with somebody who also feels really conflicted, right? Around anytime we're talking about breaking up a relationship, it's really difficult, but then there's kids, there's all the things that go with it, and this large imbalance of power and control that's going on within the relationship, and fear. I mean, obviously fear for safety, but fear for what's going to happen when I leave.
Yeah. It adds a whole different dimension to what is already a really difficult time in people's life. If someone is in a situation that's like that, is there a set of resources or advice that you would give to people in addition to what is a more quote unquote normal divorce process that they should be using for support?
Trying to understand that dynamic and really working with your local domestic violence programs. So many people I met with said, well, I'm not abused. And when we talk about it, just because there hasn't been physical violence doesn't mean that there's not an imbalance in power and control within the relationship. Right now in this world, we're talking more about narcissistic abuse and dealing with people who have narcissistic or abusive personalities. It's still all there's some differences, but it's really about this imbalance of the power and control in the relationship. So people who are to understand it and to understand that you're not alone and what's happening to you is not normal and it's not okay, but also having a really good safety plan around it. Because what we do know is that leaving can be one of the most dangerous times if you're in any kind of abusive relationship. And so doing it with care and with people who understand it, there's all these different tools that we use in the domestic violence world around risk assessments, restraining orders. It can get really complicated. So having a team of people who can help and support you and understand it is really helpful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Are there any specific resources? You mentioned kind of local support resources. So where would you guide someone to start to look if they were curious learning more?
There is the National Domestic Violence Hotline that we can provide the number below for folks that you can call and they'll hook you up to your local domestic violence program. Most places, at least across the US and in many other countries, do have local domestic violence programs. Some have attorneys that can help you through. Some don't. It just depends on that individual resource, or they'll have legal advocates, but they usually have people that they can hook you up with who understand domestic violence, particularly around the issue of divorce and safety planning, and provide so many other supports for children. Shelter is something that's a whole other conversation around emotional support, therapy, support groups, so many different things that they provide to people. And it's not just women, to anyone experiencing that kind of dynamic within their relationships.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. You know, our earlier episodes haven't really touched on this topic. And so I just want our listeners that may be in that type of situation to start to have a sense of where to go for support there. So thank you for sharing. Before we get caught up to the work that you're doing today, you also have personal experience with divorce. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
I can, yeah. So I found myself at age, I think 35, almost 10 years into my marriage, getting divorced and two young kids. And I'm a divorce attorney. And I had no idea, like, wow, being on the other side of that was just really, it's not what I expected. And it was surreal. It was truly surreal to be in that place. I had a plan. I thought, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to get mediation. We're going to have 50-50 custody. And, you know, it's going to be nice. It's going to be amicable. And unfortunately, it just didn't go the way I had wanted it to for a lot of different reasons. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the court and what it's like to be a litigant. And then I learned so much around what it's like to co-parent and how a difficult relationship as a co-parent can truly impact your kids. So yeah, there were a lot of lessons for me in that. And it really drove a lot of what I did for myself after and, you know, how my career path has taken on. I did not stay in divorce law all 27 years. I actually ended up leaving and working in healthcare for quite some time. Still in domestic violence. I was overseeing domestic violence programs and some other violence intervention programs. But I realized that there's just such a process of healing. And during this time, I had found yoga. I had found other alternative practices that became so critical to my own healing and my own growth through those years and got me to really where I'm at today. But it's a very long journey. And I think that not every divorce lawyer has been divorced. I mean, they just haven't for whatever reason, right? But I think it gives us a unique perspective to understand what our clients are going through and the vulnerability that we have when we're putting our lives on display potentially to the world. The court system is not private. Everything that has happened at home gets potentially exposed. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily always think about and talk about. And when I'm working with folks, I'm very mindful around what gets put in documents? How do we deal with it? What gets put on the record that your kids or your family may see at some point? There's some imbalance that people who stay married, that stuff doesn't get out. It doesn't get out. But in divorce, it just potentially becomes very public. Something that's very private and very painful can get turned around by the person who you most trusted and loved at one point, and then it stays with you for a very long time. So there was a lot of learning, and I don't know that lawyers, that we all we intellectually know that can happen, but until you've actually been through it and seen your own life written on the pages of pleadings and agreements, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a different spin.
It sounds like it brought a whole additional level of empathy, that you were probably already a highly empathetic person, but just taking that to a totally different level.
Yeah, it did. It did. It really made me think about it very differently. You know, when clients would talk to me and confide in me, and you know, we had this attorney-client privilege, and then the traditional attorney, we're trained to think about how can that win the case. Mm-hmm. Divorce isn't about winning or losing, in my view. It is really about how do we get these people onto a new life in the best way that we can, with is the least amount of trauma to everybody. Mm-hmm. And honestly, a divorce itself is such a traumatic experience. I think they say it's like the second highest traumatic experience for adults, other than losing, you know, a child or a spouse or somebody unexpected in your life. And the fact that you have to go through it is traumatic enough, but the process shouldn't traumatize you further. And for many of us, it does.
Yeah. I want to go back to that point on the concept of winning and losing before we talk about kind of what the work that you do today, because I think that does come into play, this sense of like a zero-sum game. There's winners, there's losers. You get this, I get this. How do you work with your clients, either when you were a divorce attorney or in your work now? How do you help them reframe the definition of success?
Yeah, it's a lot of work to do that. And when I'm doing mediation, we start with that, and we really start with goal setting. But when I'm doing the litigation, and particularly talking about people who are in unsafe or domestic violence relationships or dealing with a narcissist, there's this hope that the court is going to provide you justice. There is this belief. It's a justice system, right? That's the word we use. Mm-hmm. That is not the case, at least not in divorce. Family law is not about somebody's a winner, somebody's a loser. In every case I've done, and honestly, I've never had a case that completed a trial. We've been there ready, but then they settle. Most divorce cases end up settling. But in every case, there's compromise, and nobody, even if you get everything you want, people don't feel like they've won, because at the end, you're breaking something in half. Even if you really need and want to get out of there, there's still a loss, there's a grief, there's a shift, but there's so much pain that's associated with it. And my belief is that it's the inability to process that pain that really causes people to want to punish somebody else or make themselves feel better through the court system. And that's not the judge's job. The judge's job is not to make somebody feel better. They're not going to punish your spouse. They're just not. There's a lot of rules, a lot of laws. You know, infidelity is a big one. People talk a lot about infidelity, and they're like, well, if my spouse cheated, then I'm going to get more of X, you know, and that is unlikely going to be the case. For me, I'm a lawyer. I've always been a lawyer that's been very much around expectation setting from the very beginning, around what they can expect from a judge. I'll have folks who are like, you know, I'm going to get 100% custody and that person's never going to see their children again. And I worked in domestic violence cases. Rarely does that happen. It just doesn't. It's an unrealistic expectation. You know, we're likely going to have a 50-50 custody. In most cases nowadays, we've evolved to a different place. Somebody's going to pay child support, even in a 50-50 custody, right? Like, there's just all these expectations that people have. And when they can understand what truly happens and what the laws are and what customary, it makes a big difference. So a lot of my work is really doing some myth busting and informing people. Another one is my kid doesn't want to see the other parent and they're 14, so they get to decide. No, that's not how it works. Not in Massachusetts where I am. And I could only speak to Massachusetts law. But the more informed people are, the better. And the more that they understand that it's not about winning or losing, it is about a compromise, that we're dealing with your personal life. If you think about most other legal transactions, it's usually episodic. It's not about a whole lifetime or a whole relationship. And so we're going into things that most people, again, the privacy, and then asking a judge who's going to see you for a fraction of time, right? If anyone's been in a court hearing, if you get 15 minutes in front of the judge, that's a long time. And then we ask them to make decisions, even a trial. Like people are like, well, I'm going to take it to trial because I have all this evidence. I'm like, well, you got to get that evidence in. It's not so easy. It's just, it's not set up to give people what they're hoping. And so, I mean, having been in this a long time, being the age I'm at with the experience in my own life, I am definitely a realist and I'm going to tell you like it is. And if people don't want that, that's okay. They'll find there are lawyers who will, stoke you up and say, we can win and we can get this, and they'll take you all the way through. But again, most people, I'll see them on the other side after they're like, I just spent $50,000 and I've got nowhere. I'm like, that's what happens.
You have to hold back the "I told you so" moment.
I don't tell you so. I'm just like, I'm sorry that happened. And, what can we do today?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect segue to what are you focused on now? Because you've evolved in your career with this different professional and personal background. So tell us a little bit about the work you do today and the types of clients that you work with.
Yeah. So way back 2001, I found yoga. I remember I was driving to court one day after a particularly difficult case. I had a lot of difficult cases, but I remember I lost a client in a homicide. And so I'd been doing yoga about a year at that point, and it profoundly impacted me. And I had really found some peace in myself that I didn't even know I didn't have until you find it. Some things you don't know that you're missing until you find it, right? And just the philosophy around like the energy around that versus the energy around the court and all of these things that I'd seen. And I was like, wow, what if one day we could bring this kind of work together, right? How this could transform the legal world. That was probably in 2003 that happened. And I didn't do anything with it. Fast forward, I made a decision I was going to start my own practice in 2007. I called it Holistic Family Law. I'm going to bring in that kind of framework and really look at the whole person and treat it differently. And then I got divorced. And then I'm like, it doesn't work. So back to the drawing board, my career took a very different path. I ended up back in divorce litigation, again, with another domestic violence program, very intense litigation, taking on a lot of cases. And again, I'm realizing I kept having this niggle in the back of my mind, like this can be different. This can be different. And in 2024, I quit that litigation job and said, I'm going out on my own and I'm going to do a mediation practice. I got trained back in mediation way back in 2006. And I'm going to really put it to my full-time profession. I had been doing it over time. I kind of did it part-time for a long time and realized that I wanted to do it differently. So the integrative piece of my integrative divorce mediation is bringing other pieces of it. I really focus on nervous system regulation and bring in the work that I learned in yoga. I'm trained in Reiki and sound healing. I have a whole bunch of different certifications in alternative ways that are all around regulating your nervous system. That's the basis of it, right? Because what I've learned is if we have a regulated nervous system, we are going to make better decisions and we're going to have better agreements. And divorce, if your nervous system is not regulated in divorce, man, you've done a ton of great work. Like you're amazing. Most of us that have even done that work still get dysregulated because we're living in fight or flight. We're in that survival mode. And so if I can give voice to that and help people really do this differently, then that to me feels like such a win in a very difficult time. And if I can help you with a process that's going to feel different in your body and get you an agreement that is going to, one, cost a lot less money, a lot less time, gives you control over it, And then maybe you can start with a new life if you're co-parenting with your spouse or your soon to be ex-spouse, even more important. But if not, can we honor in some ways, and not everybody wants to do it this way, but if there's an opportunity to, what do they used to call it, like conscious uncoupling? I think Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin did that, way back. But it's not crazy. It's like really trying to give yourself some thought and some intention around how to divorce. And it's not complicated, but it's not easy either.
I want to unpack a little bit this term nervous system regulation because it gets a lot of press and it's talked a lot about. And I think most of us can probably know when we're not feeling regulated, like we know in our bodies what that feels like. But for somebody who's like, great, I know my nervous system is not regulated. What does it actually look like? What are some of the tools and practices that help people get into a more regulated nervous system?
That's such a great question. So it depends. Everybody does it different. I'm a big fan of breath work, and there's lots of different breath work. But one of the things I love about breath work is it's free and everybody has to breathe. So if you can learn and it's a quick fix. It's a quick fix to get your nervous system regulated. And you don't have to go do the holotropic crazy breath work. I mean, I love it. I think that's great. And I'm trained in a certain kind of breath work. But if you can learn the simple breath work of a shorter inhale and a longer exhale, like a 4-6 breath, that can transform a moment. And so what I used to do with my clients when I was litigating, and I was getting trained in a lot of this at the time, and I've been trained in yoga. I'm a yoga teacher, trained in Kundalini yoga. So it's a part of my world. We would breathe before we would go into court. We would literally take time to just breathe. And some people, get aggravated. They're like, don't tell me to just breathe. I'm like, but breathe with intention, right? Like I will teach you how to do it. But even just if you just take a moment and inhale, like through your nose, like for a count of 4, like we could do it and then exhale and let that exhale out your nose be a little bit longer. That's signaling to your nervous system, like it's science backed. That it's activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is it's all about finding safety in your body. That's what dysregulation is. Our body does not feel safe. And so it goes into all of these different things to keep us safe. And so once we start to learn about that and start to learn what our own cues are, and we learn techniques and things that'll help us get out of that fight or flight. But we need it, right? Like there's times that we absolutely need it. And divorce is one of them. Your body is under attack for so many people. So I'm like, some people are like, okay, so it's calm, calm, calm. I'm like, no, it's understanding regulation. And regulation is not always calm. Regulation, there's this concept of the window of tolerance. And so for many of us, this window is very small. And if you're at the bottom of it, you're just flooded. Like you're just lethargic. It might be depression. It might be just, I can't respond. My body is so shut down. I'm like, aroused. I think I always get them backwards, but it's the flat piece. And the top part of the window is you're just so much energy, so much nervousness, anxiousness. It's like negative energy, right? But it's a lot of it. And so what we want to do is start to gradually build that window of tolerance so that we can butt up right against it or right below it, but not go underneath. And so the wider you can do that, and that's doing things like breath work, like moving your body. So many of us don't move our body enough. It can be as simple as walking, whatever the exercise. I mean, yoga's my thing. It's not everybody's thing. Finding some kind of movement that helps the body complete these cycles. Because so often we're just so conditioned to shut down. I have to be calm. I can't react. Well, if you don't get rid of whatever your experience is, it's going to live in your body. And guess what? You're going to find it.
I found some of it myself through my first real experience with breath work, I'll say. So funny personal story on that regard. I do some of these like health and wellness retreats. A lot of them are centered around hiking, but I went to one that had more of these, we'll call them like spiritual practices involved. And so there was a breathwork class, and one of the physical trainers that was there for one of the strength training classes was like, "Oh, have you ever done breathwork before?" And I was like, "Yeah, breathwork, like, like alternate nostril breathing." I was like, "Yeah, breathwork." And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. This was one of those like holotropic style breathwork classes. And so for those of you that are listening, I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I've probably done a dozen of these classes now over the past couple of years. And at least the way that it was taught to me is sort of a 3-part breath. And so it's like a deep inhale, a 2-part inhale, and then a 1-part exhale. And you do it pretty rapidly, oftentimes with some music in the background. And you can have some really strong physical sensations come up here. Like they talk about having these like dinosaur hands or claws, like your body can kind of seize up. And so it was actually a pretty scary experience for me because I don't feel like the instructor properly like explained what was about to happen. And so afterwards, I was sort of freaking out because my muscles were tense, my hands had sort of clenched, and I had this like tingling sensation all through my body, and I was just like hot and sweaty. And so afterwards, the instructor came up to me and she was like, "Have you had trauma in your life?" And I said, "Well, not like big T trauma, but like maybe like lowercase t trauma. I went through a divorce, somewhat recently." And she's like, "You just let a lot of shit go." And I think to your point, like so many of us just stuff these emotions down. And even though I was a couple of years on the other side of divorce, maybe there were lots of other things that were going on in my life that were leading to this day's, work and other things that were leading to this. But that was one of the first times I realized how much it could be stored in the body and how something like breath work could help release that.
Yeah. And it could be from your childhood, right? Like there's stuff and it doesn't have to be that big T trauma. And certainly, again, many of the people I worked with had big T trauma, but all of us have little T trauma. It's just part of being human. And we're so conditioned to not experience it. And so when we do have these opportunities, and again, there's so many different ways. I love the breath work too. And I'm trained to do, I don't do it. Mine's like a 2-part, the one I'm trained in. We do 2-part inhale, exhale, but the inhales through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Yeah. I find the inhales through the mouth and exhales through the mouth, which is very activating, can be really, I have a hard time with those. I just I don't like breathing in through. But it is important that if people want to do that work, that they are doing it with somebody who's trained and to explain it, because if you're not prepared for that, that can be even more activating. Right? I was like, I did not feel relaxed after that was over, to be clear. Right. And that kind of breath work, it's funny because when I do it, I'm trained to do it with hypnotherapy. So there's like some sort of, we get into the subconscious as well. Yeah. It can be really powerful. It can be really, really powerful. But there's also lots of other ways that aren't quite so dramatic to help with that too. So you mentioned yoga and movement. There's some sort of breathwork things that people can play with or explore. Are there other elements that you would recommend to folks as well? I've been doing something for the last year and a half with a woman. She's a chiropractor, but it's called network spinal chiropractic. And so it's no touch. Like she'll touch you, but it's a no crack. She touches. Yeah. But they use your spine, like really, they read your spine to find out what's going on in your nervous system. And it's been fascinating. Like I did it for a year. We ended in September. I was like, great, I did my year. And now I'm back with her because I've noticed my back is always the piece that I know when my body's talking to me. And certain themes and patterns keep coming up. So that's kind of a much more intensive, like really doing some serious nervous system regulation work. Other things that you can do are voice activation. So the vagus nerve, there's a whole lot around the vagus nerve and the polyvagal theory, but one of the easiest ways to activate your voice, if you could sing, you can chant, you could scream. Some people like the scream therapy. I don't do that, but humming. Humming is a great way to stimulate the vagus nerve and to help put your body into what we're trying to do is get out of the survival nervous system and into the parasympathetic. So humming is a great way. And so I would have my clients hum. You could just, I might have them put their hands here and we would hum together. Tapping, I am a huge fan of tapping. So body tapping, like you can use your fingers and go through the chakras. So you start like at underneath your navel and move up to your heart chakra. Any kind of shaking, you could do the EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique tapping, where you tap through the certain points and you can say things or not, just tap. Yeah. What I love about tapping is in Chinese medicine, we have meridians that are the energy kind of pathways. Those chakras are the energy centers, but the meridians run through all of our fingers, right? In our hands. They run through our whole body. But when you're using your hands, and if you've ever done Reiki or any other kind of healing, it's all about the energies in your hands. You're doing self-healing when you're tapping. So you're connecting your fingers to your body and creating your own healing energy. And it's, again, soothing to the nervous system to tell you like, okay, I'm okay here. A lot of it, somatic work. I do a lot of somatic coaching and somatic work. I teach somatic yoga, and it's really about listening to what your body is asking for, moving in a way that feels supportive to you, breathing, vocal. Like those are the things. And there's tons of different exercises. You know, you can go online and find somatic stuff. You can find nervous system regulation stuff, but it's not hard. That's the thing. Like I want people to know I do have them here. This is a good thing. I give my clients, I employed my mother. There's these little, she made them as washcloths, but they're textured washcloths. So you can take it and rub it on your body. So I had her make me a whole bunch of them. I give them to my clients. And it's a way to disrupt a pattern and kind of bring you into the moment. What we're trying to do is sensory stuff to bring our nervous system again and start to tell our body we're safe.
Yeah. Well, a couple things that I take away from what you just shared. So first of all, it's not complicated necessarily, but there are so many different modalities that are out there that you have to find the thing that's going to work for you. And just be patient and stick with it and try a few things and see what resonates and see what doesn't. I think that was kind of my first experience with meditation. I think I tried like the Headspace app or something, and I was like, this just does not work for me. But I found other things that do really work. And so I think different things are going to work for different people. So just explore and try things is one thing that I take away from what you shared. And then the second is like, there's so much of this that is just about being in our bodies and paying attention to that. I spent, almost 20 years of my career in management consulting, and I lived from my neck up, right? Like I was so in my head all day, every day, and not at all in touch with my emotions, what my body was telling me. People would say, well, what does your gut say? Like trust your gut. And I was like, I don't know. Like I was so out of touch with that part of me. And so I think any practices that we can do that can sort of get into our body and just paying attention to, whether it's as simple as like a body scan of just head to toe, like just noticing, oh, where might I be holding some tension? Just that awareness of our bodies is something that I think, especially in today's day and age, feels really foreign to a lot of us.
Yeah, it does. And noticing and going back to the breath, I realized over these last couple of weeks, it's just been busy because we're in the height of divorce season now.
Yeah.
I don't breathe. I mean, clearly I'm breathing, but I'm not breathing like deep breaths. I recognize how much I'm holding my breath. And I realize I've probably done that for my whole life without really realizing it. Yeah. Like because I've done so much work and have a little bit more awareness, but it still can happen, right? There's not an end game. It's not like you get your nervous system regulated and you're done.
Right.
It's not. This is an ongoing back and forth. And it's not, again, with some of my clients too, they're like, I get frustrated because I'm in this cycle and I find myself back here again. Okay, because you're human. And you're alive and you're living in the world. And we notice, does that cycle shorten? It usually does. The time from when you're dysregulated, you're not there all the time. You start to learn. And the experts in nervous system regulation will say that. It's not that we're trying to be always in the parasympathetic. We have to be in the sympathetic as well. We need it. It's survival. It's what's going to keep us alive. But we have to be able to get our bodies to come back. And what's happened is, for so many of us, we're living in this state of constant stress. We don't come back to the other side. And then when you add something like divorce on top of it, it's just going to make it unbearable for some people. And so if you can start to learn awareness, and that's really what I teach people. It's really about being aware and connected to your body. And I got lots of tools. We'll go through them all, figure out what works for you. But that is the gift. That is the gift, is the awareness about it. I do subconscious reprogramming, hypnosis and things. And I always start all my clients with present moment. Because if we can be in the present moment, that is where we're alive. It is the foundation for everything. And it's a constant practice to keep coming back to it, whether you use meditation, whether you use breath, whether you use movement, whether you use the little things, right? Like the little things, whatever it is. Because when you're doing that, you're like, wow, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm breathing. I'm okay. I'm feeling the seat underneath me. I'm feeling my feet on the floor. And sometimes, that's what I would do with my clients. I do it every mediation session. I start out with a grounding, with a breath work. I'm a tuning fork freak. Love my tuning forks. I love sound healing. I'll do my crystal bowls or the Tibetan bowls. I used to go to court with my clients and use the tuning forks. Like I had a case where I would do it in a room, right? Because we would get these private rooms. On a busy day, there's no private room. And she was like, I need you to tune me up before we go in to see the judge. And I was like, oh, there's no place for us to go. She's like, I don't care. So I'm like, all right, we're standing in a very busy hallway. Out come my tuning forks. And then I'm dinging them. I'm trying not to be obnoxious around it, but I'm just trying to help her. And some other woman looks at me and she's with an attorney that I know. And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, we're just giving her a little tune up. Or my client said that. She's like, she's just tuning me up. I'm so nervous. She's just gonna help, get me in, whatever she said. And the client goes to her attorney, do you do that? I need you to do that for me. And the attorney was just like, no, what? Like, yeah, no. So I'm the crazy lady that walks into court with my tuning forks, all my things. I will spray. Like I am a believer in all things woo. And so I will employ that in my work, whether I'm in court, whether we're sitting in my mediation room, whether I've got you on I'm doing coaching with you and we're doing some breath work or whatever it is.
And you said it gets better results. I think when we met, you said that you brought him into the courtroom and it actually tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. So it was I'm back litigating on a little bit right now, only because I keep going back to the domestic violence programs. They ask me and I say yes, only on a very limited basis. Yeah. But this was it was a really hard case where a client had struggled with some custody issues. We had a very difficult opposing party. I mean, it was just so hard on every level. And my client ended up getting custody of her child back. And we went in on the last day. The other party didn't show. That in itself was a whole piece of energy work to get that party not to be there. I don't know how that happened. But we had done a lot of work and I had done some coaching with her and she was very in tune with herself. We'd done some breath work. I did the tuning forks with her. And then I have this little box it's called the Schumann box. It's frequency. It emits frequency because in the belief of the world of frequency, when you're at certain frequencies, it changes the energy. So I can carry it in my bag with me. It's just this little disc that goes in there. And so I had that. We did the tuning forks. We did our breath work. This was the last hearing. He didn't show. That was amazing. She got everything she asked for. Plus, I think we had a restraining order. We had everything. It was like the whole thing. The case got settled, dismissed, or whatever we needed. And the judge was she was so nice to my client and really commended her and said really powerful things. And my client had a really profound moment, which doesn't happen a lot. It just doesn't. And so as we were leaving the courtroom, an attorney I know, he looked at me and he's like, what just happened? I have not seen this. Usually on adoption day, that's when we get all the good feels.
Yeah. It
was a good feel day. And people in the court were just like, wow. I'm like, yeah, because she and I together, there's some power in doing it for myself, I do so much of my own work to be regulated so that I can get in coherence with my clients so that we share that regulation. And when we do it together, we're a force now. We're coming in with this strong energy and it shows. And so when I've done that, it has been much more powerful than when I don't. And not every client's on board with it. Again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it is for those that are willing to do that. And again, it's not hard. We get better outcomes. I don't have any science, just my anecdotal experiences.
Hey, I mean, if it works or if it's not on the flip side causing any harm or disservice, it's then why not? Right.
Right.
And it's a great title or a great segue because you are starting your own podcast called The Regulated Lawyer. And
I am. I'm so excited.
You're talking about the importance of co-regulation, but just talk to us a little bit about what's the mission of bringing these concepts out broader into the field of law?
So one, I want to get to folks who are mostly divorce is my area. So that's where a lot of it will be. but understanding that these two are not mutually exclusive, right? That they can go together. And so education for folks who are in the world of divorce, and also for professionals who are in this world, right? Other lawyers, because if it starts with the lawyer, they can either make or break a case, right? Lawyers can, if they're dysregulated and their client's dysregulated, they're going to feed off of each other. And lawyers are like dogs and their owners, right? Like lawyers and their clients. You know how people say that dogs look like their owners?
Yeah.
I swear to God, lawyers can take on the personalities of their clients or whatever. It's not so flip it. So instead of this heightened frenzy of, feeding the machine, learning to regulate yourself, you'll be so much better for yourself, for your family, for your clients to learn those skills. And then someday I would really love to work with judges because they have to take on so much. They sit there and see these cases day in and day out, and they have people's lives in their hands, and they're really tasked with big jobs. The clerks, the security folks, the court officers, like the whole environment in family court, at least my experience, is that the vibration in that place is so low. And it's because of the subject matter. It's, again, adoption day. When you go into that court on adoption day, it's a totally different experience. I practice in Salem, Massachusetts. So what is Salem known for? Halloween. Everybody knows Salem, right? So this in October, a lot of people want to get married in Salem. They want Halloween themed weddings.
Oh my gosh.
Well, they don't know that you have to have a license in Massachusetts, and there's rules. So if you don't have it, you have to go to the probate court and ask the judge permission. So in October, which nobody wants to be in Salem in October that works there because it's not fun. But if you have court cases, the best days would be when we would see somebody coming in and asking for that marriage license.
Wow.
Like you could feel like the joy and like the judges, the people there after like nasty cases where people are screaming at each other and people are like, "Are you sure you want to get married?" They're like, "Yes, we do." And then we would all be like, "Oh, so it can change." And my belief is that we don't have to wait for marriages in October and adoption day. There's got to be ways that we can create a different environment, a different energy. And I believe nervous system regulation is the pathway for that. And again, it's simple, not easy.
Yeah. What would you say to the listeners who might be skeptical about all of this, or even having spent all of the time that you have in the space of domestic violence, where people might be like, well, that's all nice and great for the people that are having amicable divorces, but I have a real shit show going on right now. So like, this is totally impractical. What would you say to either of those audiences about this?
So for the people that are in domestic violence situations or just really high conflict divorces, honestly, this is how I came about the key of nervous system regulation. I got so tired of telling clients, there's nothing I can do for you. The court is not going to solve your problem. It's true. The court is not going to solve your problem and you're not going to be happy with the result. But the one thing you can take control back, and particularly in cases that I saw in the domestic violence litigation that were resolved but kept going back to court, they go to court because there's so much conflict. You can change how you respond. You can change how you show up. And so much of it is about finding regulation in your nervous system because now you're taking control of yourself. And all of a sudden, those texts, those digs that your ex makes at you, you just don't have the same emotional reaction to them. And when you don't have that same emotional reaction, it shifts. It just starts to shift the dynamic. So it might not feel like it's a huge thing. It is a huge thing. And I've seen it happen. So it's the one thing where you can take control. In those cases, even more so. It's more necessary in those cases. I brought it into the world of mediation because I'm so done with all these conflicts. It was so rough on my nervous system. It took a year of me doing dedicated work with my network spinal chiropractor. I just call her my energy chiropractor, but it's truly network spinal chiropractic, that it had to undo all of these years of it in my own body. But there's ways that we can do this. There's ways that we can do this. And to the people who say the woo, I mean, I'm on the woo side of it, but nervous system regulation, the vagus nerve, that's science. And that is 100% science. There's so much science to back that up. And, again, if you want to do the woo side of it, that's fine. Or if you want to do the more traditional science piece of it, I mean, breath is science.
Yeah.
And meditation, all of that, it really has so much research that backs up the power of it and how it can truly help. And we're in a mental health crisis in our country right now. And it's not all divorce. There's so many things. Some of these tools can truly help us get out of our own way and get our bodies out of that survival mode and back into a state of regulation.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, as we wrap up our conversation today, if our listeners are really in the thick of it and maybe not working with someone like you, what is something you hope sticks with them coming out of today's conversation?
That this is accessible to everyone, that it is there, and that you just kind of have to have some awareness about it. And hopefully today you have some awareness and you can get out there and find somebody in your area of the world, wherever you are, that does the nervous system regulation. And it might not be, they're not branding it nervous system regulation divorce, but honestly, there more and more people are. It really is becoming much more well known, but you can do this. Your nervous system, you can regulate this, and you don't need to spend, again, a ton of money, a ton of resources. It's something that everybody has access to, and try it, find it. It's there.
I would offer a challenge to all of our listeners, like go pick one thing that you can go try, right? Just pick one thing. There's so many things out there. Try one new thing and just experiment with it. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Mardi. If people are interested in learning more about you or your work, can they find you?
So all of my social media handles are at Integrative Divorce Mediation. I'm mostly on Threads these days because that seems to be where a lot of people are, and I just really love it. It's such a great platform. I'm on Instagram, kind of on Facebook. Facebook's under Mardi Chadwick-Balcom. And my website is Integrative Divorce Mediation. And I actually have some free resources for folks. So there's some subliminal audios and some information. One thing you could do is download those free resources and you could listen. I try and make it as easy as possible. I also have, I think, a free tapping video. So I'll share the free resources as a way for folks just to try it, to see what works for them. And they're geared towards divorce, but they're things you can do even if you're not, when you're well past the divorce, they're still good for you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Mardi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for letting me share a little bit about my work. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Details. I hope you'll take advantage of some of the free resources that Mardi shared, which you can find in the show notes. If the earlier part of our conversation around domestic abuse resonated with you or someone you know, please know that support is available. In the U.S., you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. Or you can text START to 88788 or visit thehotline.org to chat with an advocate and find local resources. You are not alone, and help is available. Thanks again for listening to The Details, and we'll see you next week.